Okay, one of the biggest things having to do with creatives acting, accessing your talent is actually accessing the emotion. The emotion is going to be the thing that's going to be able to set you apart, where you actually build what I call a vacuum or a cavity within yourself, where literally your ability to be able to receive into an emotional cavity, which is what talent actually is. The expansion process of how you change according to what you receive is the ability and literally a definition of acting, arts, music, all of it, everything creative. So when we're working with this whole concept of the method acting approach, and we're trying to decipher between all the differences that everyone says about the differences between method acting and Meisner acting and any other acting, every single different acting technique. Look, the truth is this: method acting is 100% absolutely real life experience. When you're dealing with method, you're dealing with your real life. There is not any technique anywhere in this world that has ever been consistently developed or done that doesn't include an aspect of reflection, of self-reflection in the arts and creative crafts. Now, let me repeat this. This is very important because when we understand this, now then we can empower ourselves to understand that when we're working from our own past experiences, and when that is absolutely method, and then when we are working with our imagined experiences or we are working within our imagination, that would not be method. Um, there's other nuances to this, but this is as plain as it gets. The reality is that there's not one actor, there's not one artist, there is not one musician that would not mix these two while they're doing their craft. It's very, very rare that there would be a small portion of the work that would only come from the imagination side. Typically, we're dealing with people that are accessing their life experience. If there's any life experience at all that comes into their work, then they're working according to method acting. And when we understand that, then we understand that we are working in a way that's we can empower ourselves. We can do all kinds of incredible creative things when we're able to understand that we don't need to be afraid of being method. Now, I've seen 25,000 hours of acting classes, all types of people, top people in every kind of walk of creative life. And that's just the acting class side of it. So when we're working with I've seen tons of people being afraid of being method. They don't want to come across as being method. Now, there's method acting, which is how to be able to access your real life experience and put it into creative work. Let's get into this quickly. So, how to be able to achieve that would be the ability to be able to, without blocks or hindrances, without any kind of encumbrances or personal blocks within yourself, be able to access past memory of sorts. And that could be muscle, it could even be muscle memory, it could be memory of a past actual memory experience, it could be anything that's from your life experience. When you're accessing your life experience, you're participating in method acting, whether you want to be or like it or don't like it. It's just the fact. Now, when you're able to do that in a way that has complete freedom in your work, that's when you're going to start hitting the creative levels, which is the creative levels of which you will reach your creative heights. You want to be able to, and the way to be able to achieve your own creative height is the ability to be able to self-activate the personal life experience. And then when you have that self-activated, there's there's no baggage that's on it other than what it is. So you're literally putting yourself over to an unknown experience. You're putting yourself over with the freedom of not having that the real life experience actually affecting you in a way that's dragging you down, unless that's like, let's say if you go into despair. Well, part of activating despair from part of your life will encompass all of those things connected with despair. But the difference is that when you're activating that despair from your real life with method acting, and believe me, all the Meisner's actors do this too. There's every single acting technique. You when you're working with your talent in a way that activates depth, the depth is going to be but you're able to release it into the freedom of the work. So you're able to release your personal life experience into the freedom of not having to have control over the outcome. Now, what this does for you as an artist, actor, musician, dancer, singer, whatever it is, you're going to be able to empower yourself to be able to use that spark of essentially emotion. Um, the emotions and feelings, obviously, emotions are deeper than feelings. When you get something that's going to be more visceral, you're dealing with something that's going to be more emotional. And your ability to experience and receive. Now, you're experiencing something. So you're experiencing something that you receive from the other actor. You are receiving the other actor. You are receiving the environment of the imaginary world, your given circumstance or your imaginary circumstance, whatever you want to call it. The exterior stuff is affecting you in a way you are receiving it, and then all of a sudden you're having an experience. An ambiance then gets created within you, and the audience can tell that you've been able to release your talent into the circumstance because your ability to be able to receive. So it's not that you don't have any of your own life baggage with you when you're doing your acting. It's the fact that you've been able to work in a way. It's a tiny bit of discipline where you're able to still stay focused on the than something other than yourself. It could be the other actor, it could be the other singer, it could be the other dancer, it could be just the circumstance, and you are receiving that into yourself, and that is the health of the balance. That's the balance. That's where the audience is able to, by simply observing you through the lens of the camera or through a real-time experience on stage, and I should say a real-time experience on camera, because that's the most idealist way for you to work on camera is in real time, um, which is incredible because but you bring over that the ability for you to have the freedom from, even with an activated life experience, you are receiving something additional than what you've already self-activated. The emotion that you've self-activated, or the emotions that you've self-activated, you are still able to receive. So therefore, you are not stuck in your acting baggage or your life baggage, but you are definitely affected of how you respond based on, but you are still able to receive. That is the ability to be able to work through those things and know that whatever you've triggered within your method or within your acting technique isn't overpowering you, because you are still able to receive. Now, this is incredibly important, and it's it's important for you because once you're able to understand this, you're able to then catapult your ability of where you can put your actor's faith and your actor's trust in yourself when you're working. So when you put your actor's faith in the ability that you know that you can trust, that as long as you are receiving, you have not gone too deep in your emotion, then you can then achieve method acting or whatever you want to call it. Look, acting's acting. And the thing is if you're working with Meisner, and of course, I love a lot of different techniques, including the Meisner. So just understand, and that is the background of which I've developed from in ways that have been incredibly up to date with many of the different things, and also honoring the fact that there's been a history of variances within even the Meisner technique that has gone back even to the 1950s. So when we're working to be able to achieve this, we are working to live without the ignorances that we have to put up with blocks. We are actually working so that we activate what we're activating, and then we are receiving so we can see how that actually ends up forming. That's the creativity. So don't be afraid of method. When you're afraid of method, you're going to be putting hesitation into your acting. Every single time you put hesitation into your acting, you are not actually expressing your full talent. Every single time you put hesitation into your acting, you're not actually experiencing your full talent. So the question then becomes, how do you be able to achieve that? And I just told you, you've got to be able to work on the ability to the depth of you, be able to activate the talent and the emotion, the activation, but then at the same time, be able to know that you are receiving something that's more than just yourself. And that is the synergistic element of acting. That is the ability to be able to do both method acting and non-method acting. Now, non-method acting is going to encompass great imagination. Now, I have for hours on end testing different things in many of the different books that I write, and other techniques to be able to activate emotion. Imagination. Imagination is an incredible tool to be able to develop and will develop your talent. But even when you develop your imagination, or whatever acting technique you're working on, your whole essence is still that you've got to be able to work on being able to receive. So you can't get lost in your imagination. Otherwise, you're going to look like you're on a big, I don't know, I don't know what kind of trip, but some kind of um, of self journey that's not going to actually have a connection to reality. Which what you want to be able to achieve is the ability to spark and stimulate your imagination. Have that imagination actually affect you on a visceral level, which means it actually activates emotion, not a feeling, not a thought, not an idea, not somebody else's feelings, your own feelings and emotion. And when you're able to use your imagination to activate your emotion, you're going to be able to spark a visceral response within yourself. And then the same thing applies. Acting is acting. You've then at that point turned yourself over into receiving an unknown outcome. When you receive an unknown outcome, all of a sudden you're starting to develop your craft and your talent of being able to achieve something that is greater than yourself. So the essence of your talent, your own personal talent, is to work to be able to accurately. You want to be able to accurately get the accurate range of the emotion activated within yourself. That's a skill. That's a talent level. And you also want to be able to be willing enough to be able to release that in order to be able to have a new unknown experience. When you can achieve those two things at once, you're working at, I don't know, I mean, you could probably call it both conscious levels. You know, you've got the consciousness of what you've self-activated, and then you've got the conscious levels of the circumstances that you're in, and then you might even have another scenario like you'd add, which would be potentially a relationship, and the relationship could be its own development of an exercise. Look, I have incredibly spent time where, and this is outside of the 25,000 hours of classes, of acting classes time, where myself I would I would see something in class, or I would brainstorm in my imagination, and it happened all sorts of ways, both ways, and then I would make sure that I was working to be able to activate the ability that I could activate that range of emotion, and then be able to practice the ability of that emotional preparation, that emotional activation, um, and then be able to live out something with that. Now, if I was rehearsing alone, I would be able to activate that emotion, isolate what aspect I wanted to have or not have, or be able to figure that out. Now, if you're working with the emotional preparation books, there's 800 emotions in those books. 800 emotions that every single actor, every single singer, every single dancer, every single creative, seriously, honestly, I mean, painters and poets should be able to use those materials to be able to create things, including songwriters. So it's incredibly important where you isolate what that range is or those ranges of the emotions and then be able to activate those. Now, what I would do is if I was rehearsing alone, then I would start an impromptu um, monologue. That would be an improvised monologue based off of what emotion I have just sparked. Sometimes I would do a scene directly at the mirror and literally be able to do that. Sometimes I would pick an object in the room and work to be able to formulate that. If I was working on a relationship, I would still, again, you can't be afraid of mixing the method acting with the imagination acting. You want to be able to figure out if you can find what triggers those emotions within you and be able to self activate those triggers. Once you're able to self activate those triggers, then you're able to be able to have the experiences of a real time experience in the imaginary acting world or in the given circumstance of the writer, whatever you want to call your acting scenario. Practicing that, like for instance, for relationships, I would go do copious background. I called it background relationship exercise, which I should write down. Um, basically, this is a key because when we're working to be able to, um, hold on one second. Basically, I would do copious exercises. Like, let's say sometimes I would work with an actor that was already an actor. Now, they don't even know I'm working with them, but I'm still developing whatever type of relationship that I'm working with them on. Could be establishing that somebody's a brother or a distant relative or a whatever the scenario. Maybe there's a boss employee relationship. There could be a apprentice relationship. Whatever those are, I would go in and I would have copious, detailed imagination, daydreams about being in a relationship with whomever I was working with, whoever I was building a relationship with. And then I could literally take that entire imagination, that entire imaginary activation. Now, the imagination of the activation would activate me viscerally. Well, then I would know I could all I have to do is get myself to work in there's a few different things I'm not telling you, but it's basically I would work to be able to reactivate those things while I was out working actually in the scene. So if when I go to work on the scene and I've worked on what it feels like to be in an apprentice situation, what it feels like to be in a whatever type of relationship that was in the actual script that I was working on or project that I was working on, then I would be able to identify those elements by activating that, making sure I was working at an emotional level, activating the emotion, and then being able to go into the impromptu to I would wait for this is important. I would wait until there was a deep spark. Um, and then once the spark happened, now a spark's different than a trigger. A trigger is something that will happen sometimes in interaction, for acting interaction, or in emotional exploration. I would wait till I was deep enough where I knew my depth level, where once I started the focus of the concentration, um, and started to express the impromptu monologue, I would literally then be in a complete what would be a free flow of energy, and that would be the way to be able to continue to practice to rehearse the ability to be able to achieve that. So this is an important thing. You don't want to be afraid of method acting. You don't want to be afraid of Meisner acting. If people say that they know all about the differences and they say that there's going to be harm done to people with method, there's never ever been an imagination exercise that doesn't affect the. I mean, they're very. It's very rare that there would be anybody that would be even nearly talented enough to be able to stay in their imagination long enough to be able to carry their imagination over directly only into the imaginary circumstance or imaginary given circumstance. So it happens, but these are people that look. I've been working on this stuff for 28, 35 years. I don't know how long, but it's been a long time. So it's taken time and development to be able to work on both levels. But still, even when I'm working within my imagination, I'm still open to um, real life experiences will still bleed in to the experiences in my acting. Now, because I've worked so long and hard at this, there is a lot of truth to the fact that a lot of times there would be no real life activation happening in my acting except for pure imaginary work within the scene. And when I started breaking through those levels many years ago, oh man, it was a whole nother element. But also, um, it supported the ability to make sure that I had myself in check emotionally in every single way, both personally, professionally, creatively, all that. And then at a certain point when I was working on the emotional preparations books, to be able to experiment with the different emotions and the techniques on being able to get the emotions, literally at that point, I started to intentionally put myself over the edge of what I knew would be my own barrier. And then I found that by doing that, it started to um, expand my talent even more. But I would never recommend that, because when you do that work, you want to probably do that in a group setting, where a group setting would be the way where you've got a more of um, a, I wouldn't say more support, but I would say a different type of environment where um, there's um, there's going to be more of a synergy that's going to be able to help people stretch themselves in an emotional level in different ways. Now that could be exercises that go to do all kinds of things, which could include rehearsal AA groups when nobody has alcohol issues, or they do, either way. Um, or other types of self-help groups, or scenarios where you're put in to making a decision as a group where one or two of you have to be selected from everybody and they all have their own circumstances. These are the kinds of group exercises that you could do. Look, when I was trained for acting, I was trained in 2 and 3 hour improvisations, and that was after working for several hours in an acting class. And sometimes the acting classes went on for 6 and 9 hours. So, and that was after, I mean, plus I had my regular, you know, then plus the my regular life on top of that. So, you know, that went on for years. And so, don't be afraid to explore this stuff, but understand some of these things are really, really, really vital and valuable for you. Please ask me any questions. I'll put that into the emotions podcast. Check out emotionalpreparation.com and ask some questions there. And uh, just let's keep going through this, because these are some great questions and good comments about the difference. And you must not be afraid of method acting, because if you are, it's going to hinder your ability to be able to work through your own personal emotional blocks. And that is an incredible statement that I'm making, because it's you have seen this over and over and over. Um, and there's been times when I've experienced bits of it myself, where there's something I didn't know that I was actually putting a block in front of myself, where I would be afraid that, or thinking that I'd done something wrong. No, all of these things are learning processes to work through, and the more you're able to be more versatile, um, one small last tip would be to take the ability of your work and literally move it in a way that is able to, when you feel stuck in one emotion, go into a different emotion to be able to make sure that you have that fluidity. So, that's a director's and acting note that I've said for years. You want to be able to contrast that emotion in order to make sure that you're not stuck in whatever you're going into. If you're working on something that has depth. So, all right, thanks a lot. Thank you.